Live. There you go. You look good. Okay. Here we go.
What up, Mike? Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto, Mike, we get the city love.
Welcome to episode 1437 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. And Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making his Toronto Mike debut is the host of Metro Morning on CBC Radio 1. It's David Common.
How are you?
Welcome to Toronto Mike, Mr. Common.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
You're anything but common, right?
I'm anything but common. Yeah, that's
an ironic name, like when a skinny guy is named Fats.
You could go that way. Sure.
Work with me there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can't wait to find out more about your great career at the CBC. As you can see, I donned my 1976 CBC shirt. This is the shirt that was like distributed to TV Ontario. Had like some alliance with CBC for covering the Montreal Olympics. And a guy at TVO thought that maybe I would enjoy this shirt more than he does. It was just sitting in his closet.
It is epic. I will give you full credit. It's not only is it beautiful in the 1970s orange, but it has the 1970s collar that goes on for like 3 or 4 blocks. Right. Yeah.
It's highly flammable though. So
Yeah.
please don't light any matches near me. I'm worried it'll just spark up. It will be done. So be careful around this flammable shirt. But I'm going to ask you right at the top before we find out how you're doing, and I read some nice notes that came in. You're a smart guy. Is there a word for when you're like frightened AF of something, but also selfishly you love it? Because I'm referring to this February weather we've had in Toronto. I'm out there waiting for you. I had a Palma Pasta delivery, and it felt like, I don't know, May?
It is weird. And it's like this yo-yo winter weather, right? Because we go on and off. It's going to be, as we record this, it's 8 degrees and wall-to-wall sun out there.
Right.
And we just come out of a weekend when it was, I think it was like minus 20 at one point with the wind chill. So it's weird. It's beautiful. I feel a little guilty, climate change, and yet also...
Well, that's it. Is there a word for this? Like maybe there's a German word for it. I don't know. But like... It's
it
scary.
Is probably the
it's
Germans.
frightening. I think it's, yes, they have a word for everything. But I'm frightened by this idea of like, tomorrow it's going to be double digits temps. And it's not the first day we'll have double digits temps in this month. But at the same, so it's frightening. But at the same time, as a cyclist, like I kind of absolutely love it. Like I'm setting a February record, a personal best for kilometers I can bike in the city. And it's all thanks to Mother Nature.
Yeah, it's just whether Mother Nature is thanking us for it. That's the question. But I'm glad you're getting out on your bike because absolutely, across this city, it's amazing to see just the number of people out in shorts, first of all, right?
Oh, yeah. You always had those weirdos, though, who would like wear the shorts in minus 10. Just
okay,
like...
I don't think they're weirdos, and I'll tell you why.
Why? Because you're one of them.
No, I'm not, but I have a close friend who lives in Edmonton, and they get winter there. He does not own a pair of pants. I have seen him once. I've known him 20 years. I've seen him once in pants, and it was his wedding. And I think he had to go and buy them, and then he promptly got rid of them right after that. So he only wears shorts year round. He's got legs like the size of tree trunks.
Well, he's just showing off then, right? I always say like if I had a six-pack, what did I watch? I watched a movie the other day, and this guy, the guy from This Is Us, and his name is eluding me right now. But I was telling my wife, like, you could grate cheese on this guy's abs. Like, this is a six-pack.
Just like you and me, yeah.
Yeah. And I think if I had that upper body, I would never wear a shirt. David, I would never wear a shirt if I had that upper body.
Isn't there a story about, is it Alec Manoa? No, who there's...
Well, he does not have a six-pack, Alec.
No, he definitely doesn't. Who am I thinking of? Who put? No, I'm. You know what? I'm.
Yeah, you know what? There was a guy on the
Cavs.
I think there was a guy in the Cavs who would always take off his shirt just because he could. But lots going on here. So let me just read a couple of quick notes that came in, and then we'll get to know you better, and we'll talk about your new gig, which is I think maybe the highest profile gig in this damn city when it comes to radio. So we have lots of ground to cover, but. Do you know the band from Winnipeg, The Watchmen?
Yes, I do.
How well do you know The Watchmen? Like, we're similar vintage. I might have a few years on you, but you probably rocked out to The Watchmen in the 90s. Was this a big deal to you?
I don't think I was super exposed to them, but I am absolutely familiar with them. Yeah.
Okay, because you are a Winnipeg guy, right? But
I was born in Winnipeg, absolutely. But I really, look, here's the deal.
I'm listening.
Where you're from in this country, it all depends on where you are in this country. So here I am speaking to Toronto Mikes in Toronto.
Right.
I can tell you, I grew up here. I went to kindergarten here. I went straight through high school, went through university, all in this city.
Kindergarten?
Yeah, from an early age. However, when I worked, as I did in Saskatchewan and Manitoba and New Brunswick and other places, Toronto's not super popular. So
they hate Toronto.
Yeah, so you go and you talk about being from somewhere else.
You say you're from Winnipeg.
Yeah.
That's like when Americans travel in Europe and they have
with
a Canadian flag. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
You're like, it's more convenient for you to identify as a Winnipegger because Canadians like Winnipeggers. But why is it? What's the main reason? Is it a bit of a jealousy, or is it the sense that we think we're the center of the universe? But why does the rest of this country seem to dislike Toronto so?
So to some degree, it is deserved. Right? Like, I can say that as somebody who has lived around this country, that there are a lot of things that do seem to circle around Toronto. But at the same time, a quarter of the population of the entire country is right in the GTA here.
Right.
You go southwestern Ontario, it's an even bigger chunk than that. It's huge. We decide federal elections. We decide provincial elections. Lots of money flows through here. Bay Street, all the big headquarters are here. And so you hate something, there's a good chance that its primary operations are here.
Well, here, write this note down, David. This city of Toronto will not determine the next federal election. I just want you to take a note right there as my prediction.
Okay.
We will not.
I'm saying all of the GTHA, though.
Oh, so you're throwing in a lot of Mississauga and Brampton.
You throw in some 905s there. And anyway, we'll see.
Shout out to the 905. So the reason I bring up The Watchmen, I'm a big fan of The Watchmen, but the drummer for The Watchmen is a guy named Sammy Cohn.
Mm-hmm.
He just wants you to know, David, that he's a big fan of your work.
That is very kind.
I think so, too. And I now look to my right, and I see Brian Linehan, patron saint of Toronto Mike. And I realized this was a gift from The Watchmen. So The Watchmen actually gifted me this to tell me that Brian Linehan would be proud of me. So shout out to Sammy Cohn, who's listening at home.
Very nice. Shout out, indeed.
Lanrick Bennett Jr. So Sammy's an FOTM. That means friend of Toronto Mike. Mm-hmm. David, you're now an FOTM. So welcome to the fraternity.
Yeah, I appreciate being welcome to the club.
Lanrick Bennett Jr. is also an FOTM, the bicycle mayor of this city. And he just let me know that he chilled with you and the mayor last week. So this is the circle that Lanrick Bennett Jr. is rolling in, is hanging with. It's people like David Common and Olivia Chow. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, now where was this? Were we treading water? We'd fallen off the ferry or something
How
like that?
Many times last week did you hang with Olivia Chow? How many different days?
There was an event with a bunch of developers, including people who do affordable housing, co-op housing, and University of Toronto, and they had me come in and ask some of the tougher questions of the mayor. So I think that's probably what they're talking about, because the mayor and I don't go skipping down the beach together or anything like that.
No, that's too cozy because you're a journalist.
Yeah.
You can't get too cozy with these political figures that you need to cover objectively.
I like that you've got friends of your program here. I think that totally makes sense. I get a little agitated when people say we have friends of a program because
I'm not a journalist,
political
though.
leaders.
In my defense, you are a journalist. We're going to cover some of that ground in a moment. I am absolutely not a journalist.
Okay.
So I can have friends.
What do you like to call yourself?
Oh, good question. I am a mere shout out to Basement Dweller. I was going to call myself a basement dwelling podcaster, but that might not cover it all. But I'm definitely not a journalist. Like, I mean, I don't hold myself to the same standards that I would hold, for example, FOTM David Ryder from the Toronto Star, for example. Like, there's standards in journalism. CBC has a, I don't know what you call it, a code of
Journalistic
ethics.
standards and practice. No, sorry.
Yeah,
Journalistic standards and practices.
I need that echo effect for that one, David. But I have no such. Mine is just be as honest as you can. And when you're unsure of something, don't be afraid to say you're unsure. Like, don't act like you know something when you're guessing. So I have my own personal standards, but absolutely not at the same.
Yeah, that's a good rule for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people do that, right? I produce shows for people who they aren't sure. They think maybe this is the way, but they present it like they did, you know, hours of homework and research and have come to this conclusion. And it's like, nah, they're just kind of guessing and they're presenting it like fact. Not cool.
Not super cool. No.
Okay, so let's start with the present day and then we'll roll back. By the way, David, do you drink beer? That's a loaded question right off the hop.
I have been known to drink beer.
Okay. Would you like the most delicious craft beer that this city has to offer?
And what would you proclaim as said beer?
Well, listen.
He asks with a table
you don't have to
full
do
of
this?
beer in front of him.
You don't have to do
I'm
this on
familiar
Metro
with.
Morning.
I know all of these beers. So here's my deal. Like,
Talk to me.
I can't sit there and endorse a product. That would be against the.
Journalistic
But you're
standards
not on
and
CBC
practices.
right now. Like, I feel like
Even
that's
then, I
on
still
the air.
no, I still can't.
Okay.
Yeah,
Really?
But having said that, I can say to you as a normal human being, I am familiar with all of these. The Lake Effect IPA that's there with you has long been in my fridge, as has the Canuck Pale Ale. That is a personal favorite. So yes,
So you're taking this home with you, David. You're bringing home this Great Lakes beer. That can't find. How many rules? So whenever I invite somebody from the CBC, and over the year, many people, I'm thinking of Tom Harrington. I could go down
Great
the
guy,
list.
yeah.
You know? We'll talk in a moment about Matt Galloway, who came over here. We could talk about. She's no longer at the CBC, but she was there forever. Diana Swain.
yeah.
I mean, Jill Deacon's been over here. Dwight Drummond. I'll keep going.
It's a long list.
It's a long list. Every time I get a chance to wear the shirt.
This explains why they all smell like beer.
Now, the thing, David, is I always take note of the fact that there's a process, right? Like, you can't just go on Toronto Mic'd, right? Do you have to clear it with like a committee? What's going on there? You got to run it by Justin Trudeau? What's going on?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. He and I get on the phone every day and say, what should I do? Let me take my orders from you.
Justin, I'm going on a Toronto Mic'd.
No, that does not happen, obviously. We do run through a system. It's not really a committee, but a system is even too big a word. Like I say to a guy, hey, I'm going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Any problem? No.
Good.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when there's a problem, I need to know about it, David. By the way, we're live at live.torontomike.com. So we're going to get you to Metro Morning and then we're going to go backwards. But I do see that the a wonderful FOTM, Jesse Hirsch, even though when he writes me love letters, he has ChatGPT write these love letters to me. But that's between Jesse and I. We'll work that out on our own. But he says, I definitely want to hear more about the role of objectivity, or more importantly, how it can still exist. So, like, I mean, you kind of touched on it with the beer. Like, you can't go on Metro Morning and say the greatest craft beer in this city is Great Lakes beer, even if you personally believe that to be true. Like, you can't, but you could state it as, in my humble opinion. Like, that's the preface you could use, right?
Well, look, I can tell you about things that are in my own life. Absolutely. What we would never want to do is create a perception of a conflict of interest. I can't now go, you know, what if, like, I'm not going to use GLB, Great Lakes Brewery, as an example, but what if you're talking about, ABC Beef Company, and you give me a side of beef, and I'm like, oh, this is fantastic, delicious beef, and then ABC goes and, poisons a couple of people with bad beef or something like that. Well, how do I go and do an interview with ABC Beef when there's a thing out there of me going,
I hear you loud and clear, but if you don't accept any money from ABC Beef, I believe you can still say that you enjoyed that beef as you ate it. Like, you didn't lie, you liked that beef. And then if this issue, you can still adhere to these journalistic practices and hold their feet to the fire as a journalist.
I can totally hear you saying that you see it that way. But remember, there's a difference between conflict of interest and perception of conflict of interest.
Right.
And so perception matters in this business, right? Perception matters, particularly today. So you're talking about objectivity.
Right.
What do you want to know about objectivity?
So is this a code that you mentioned? You have to sign off on a document essentially that says, while you're on CBC airwaves and representing the CBC, you, David Common, will adhere to these standards.
The journalist, the JSP as we call it, which is like our internal Bible, right? It's and it's a constant topic of discussion. There are different things that govern everything from when do we use hidden camera, under what conditions, how do we protect confidential sources, how do we ensure that our journalism is fair. So there's a whole bunch of different topics in it. But objectivity is a funny one, and I talk to friends about it when I'm sitting around having a beer. Objectivity, some would argue, doesn't exist and can't exist because we're all products of our own upbringing, right? We all have our own...
You're a product of your environment.
Yeah, exactly. And so to that extent, we're all subjective characters to a degree. I try to subscribe to fairness as my buzzword, if I have one. And it's trying to always, even if something to some people may seem completely crazy, let's try to understand it from another person's perspective and be fair to them. So fairness is a really important thing. And I think particularly in the world in which we live today, where it's so easy to not have a conversation with somebody you disagree with, to just sit there and demonize them, it's important to try to keep those conversations going. Because frankly, if we don't, where we're heading is bad.
Okay, so a lot of these themes you've just kind of alluded to, we're going to touch on later in this conversation. But I really am curious about how you got the gig as host of Metro Morning. Did you know the previous host of Metro Morning was also from Winnipeg?
Yes, I do.
Is there a bias towards Winnipeg? Even though I just found out now that you actually were in Toronto for kindergarten.
Yes, although I will say I did go back after kindergarten, so there were periods of back and forth, right? So, yeah, I went to Jesse Ketchum Public School, Bay and Davenport. Shout out to my downtown gang. It was a very different environment at that time. Charles Street down the road. It's where a lot of, newcomers, refugees arrived in the city, and so that was my backyard in the sense of growing up. I had lived Bathurst and St. Clair, Vaughan and St. Clair area, everywhere from, like Witchwood and Kenwood Road. Sure. So shouting out to those neighborhoods, which were so formative for me growing up. But, as we talk broadly, what was the question? I've gone everywhere else. I've done the worst thing.
Well, I'm trying to determine whether you're really from Winnipeg.
Oh, am I really
if you're
from
here
Winnipeg?
in kindergarten, you can't
the
remember.
birth certificate says so.
So the previous host here. So let me walk you through.
Yeah,
so,
Ismaila, yeah.
Yeah, Ismaila was the previous host of Metro Morning. Now he's doing Fresh Air on weekends.
Yeah.
So can you give us a little insight into how you got this gig? Is Metro Morning still, and I believe it is, might be so, you're going to tell me now, is that the most listened to morning show in the city?
Yes, it is. Now, you will hear some others make similar claims. It's because the way in which the data goes, you can look at it in different ways. So I'll tell you this. We are on the air from 5:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. Right. And in that time, we are the number one radio show, and by a considerable margin.
Like people 12 and above, basically.
2 and above. 2 and above. Yeah.
Never forget those toddlers.
Yeah.
They're listening with their
parents. They're key to the demographic. Come on.
You got to groom the future generations to be CBC.
That's why we have so much Lego content on.
But I know what you mean. Like if you slice and dice the data points in the demographic detail, at some point everybody could be number one. Like we're number one. Like women 18 to 24 who listen in their car. You know what I mean? Like it's like you can slice and dice demos and spin it any way you want. But in terms of ears, there's more ears listening to Metro Morning on CBC Radio 1 than any other morning show in this city, as far as you know.
It's not just that as far as I know. I am extraordinarily confident. There is very rich data about this. Yes.
It's the only morning show I listen to, so you're preaching to the choir here. And I think you're very good as host of Metro Morning. I'm just curious. So did you want the gig after Matt Galloway? And then, I'm curious, when did you...
Like, what's the trajectory?
Yeah, like if you can walk me through it, because, Matt was there a long time.
Yep.
Beloved.
10 years,
Andy Berry was
basically.
beloved, and then Matt Galloway was beloved. And as great as Ismaili Alpha it was, my opinion, I think it was a bit of a misfit. Like, I never felt like he fit in, particularly with the journalistic side. I think he's much better on Fresh Air. I know he changed for his family purposes, etc. But that does open the door for you to take the seat. So can you walk us through the nuts and bolts of how does David Common get that like prestigious role on Toronto radio. It's probably the best gig in the city when it comes to radio.
Yeah, and I know you didn't want to go back too far into the distance, but unfortunately it sort of starts a while ago. So I worked outside of the country for a little less than a decade, and when I came back into Canada, I was the host of World Report, which is the newscast that goes into Metro Morning and all the radio morning shows right across the country. Top 10 minutes of the hour, every hour.
Right.
And that meant that I was in studio with then Matt as the host of Metro Morning for, once or twice. And we would talk about the day's news. And so that was kind of my first connection into the program. But I spent almost my entire career outside of a studio. I was, I like to play outside.
Sure.
And so that was what my job was when Matt left the program. I was host of Marketplace, which is our consumer affairs investigative show, as well as a correspondent who would travel around this country and sometimes around the world doing you name it. And so, yeah, and that was kind of my thing. But this opportunity came up. There was a discussion. We have CBC has because it is a bureaucracy. There's a process, and went through that process. And I'll tell you where I was. I was on a ship, a Canadian Navy ship, in the South China Sea, about to transit the Taiwan Strait, to be followed by the Chinese Navy at very close quarters, and the satellite phone rang.
Wow.
Hey, David.
What the hell are you doing there?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just on vacation. It's yeah.
David, what's up?
Yeah. So that's how it all went down.
Wow. Okay. Is it like an audition process, or do they literally? I guess you had already
they're
done
familiar
so many
with
weeks
with my work.
And how's it going so far? Like, so how long have you been the permanent host of Metro Morning now?
Okay, so we're talking here close to the end of February, and it's been a little more than 4 months. So it's still pretty early days.
Yeah.
How's it going? I think it's going pretty well. We're again, if I go back to the data, I'm going to sound very corporate here, but if I go back to the data, the data is telling us that that a bunch of the changes that we've made, and there's not a huge number of them, but a bunch of the changes that we've made are resonating with the audience. People are listening for longer. More people are listening. So that's really encouraging to see, and we hear from people too. Anecdotal matters.
Absolutely. So 4 months into this thing, so are you used? What time does your alarm go off in the morning? I'm sure that's the most frequently asked question.
It is the most frequently asked question. Okay, so here's my deal.
Yeah.
We are on the air at 5:30 a.m. I wake up at 4:30 a.m.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I feel like that's good. Like,
that is really.
You live next door to the studio?
Yeah, I wish I did. There was a time where I remember backfilling filling in for Matt one time,
right? And
my alarm went off. My alarm did not go off. Ooh. I basically just didn't turn it on. And 4:17 a.m. I woke up. My wife woke me up and said, "Aren't you doing Metro Morning today?" And I got to the studio very quickly and at the very last second. But no, I wake up now 4:30 on the air an hour later. I do a bunch of work at night so that I can stay asleep longer. I argue that 4:30 a.m. is the morning.
You know what? You're on the border now. Like, now
I think you're getting close.
But what time is night for you? Like, are you shutting it down by 9 a.m.? Okay.
9-ish. 9 p.m., yeah. Shutting things down around then, yeah. So some nights it's later. Like, there are nights where I go out with friends or I've got a thing going on, and then it's more like 11:30. But
well, when the Leafs are in the playoffs or whatever, right? You probably want us.
That'll do it.
That'll do it, right?
That'll do it. Yeah.
Are you a sports fan?
I absolutely, and you've hit the time when I get most into sports is when we hit playoffs.
Right.
But it wasn't sort of a big part of my life growing up, but I see you got your Leafs paraphernalia here.
That's my boy Wendell. He's all
Is that
heart.
Wendell Clark there?
That's Wendell Clark.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't, with the glare of some of the lights, I can't see his face, but I see the Captain C there on his jersey. So
yeah, that's back when Doug Gilmour was the assistant captain.
Sorry,
I've always called it, my whole life I've been calling it assistant captain. It's not assistant captain. As Hebsy would tell me, it's associate captain or something like that. It's not assistant. Didn't you always think the A was assistant growing up?
I did think it was assistant.
It's not.
You're
Apparently, it's
associate.
I'm associate. I think is the word.
Yeah.
The A or alternate.
You're
one of those.
Alternate captain.
One of those.
No, that's got to be it. I think
it's
alternate.
Okay,
captain.
not associate.
Yeah.
That's a whole different title. But not assistant. And all my I have a Gilmore jersey A on it when Wendell was wearing the C, and I always call it's alternate. Yeah, I've been corrected on the live stream by. Thank you, Oakville Mike, for seeing there's a lot of mics out there. Hey, Canada Kev works for CBC.
Okay.
He says at one point they did try to add advertisements to CBC Radio 1, like commercials would air, and he says, this is his words, he says it was a disaster, listener revolt, and that was quickly undone.
Yeah, it was. I think that was on, so there's 2 radio things. This was on Radio 2. I think the commercials got
We've
on.
never had commercials on Radio
I don't
1,
think
as far as
so.
you know.
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
But yeah, I remember it did not go down well.
Not well, no, absolutely not. Now you've now touched on a few different things you did throughout your career before you got to Metro Morning. We now learned on a typical day you're going to shut it down at 9 o'clock. You're going to wake up at 4:30. I actually think to be on the air at 5:30, waking up at 4:30 is pretty sweet. Like, I've heard stories from people who have to be on the air at like 5:30, and they're getting up at like
they're getting
3
up.
o'clock or something.
And so for some people, they have to do that. Now, like there's a studio director I work with who's great. She wakes up much earlier than I do, and she will wake me up if there's stuff that
Can you name her?
be addressed. Susan McReynolds.
There you go.
Shout out to Susan, who keeps all things, keeps the train on the tracks, and then some. 4:30 a.m. is a tricky one, but I am one of those, and I'm lucky this way. When my eyes open, I'm on.
You're ready to go.
Yeah.
Did you grab yourself no coffee?
I don't drink coffee. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have yourself a quick shower? Is that
no? Anything you can do to save time in the morning. You use that to save time in the morning. Lay the clothes out at night, pack some food for the next morning.
Right.
You do that all at night.
So what time are you entering the studio? Like, I feel like I'm going to sing some Rush here. And the words of the words of the
5 to
prophet
5.
forbidden in the studio. So 5 to 5, you're in there. Okay. And then it's all. And again, there are shows. I will tell you, there's an FOTM named Stu Jeffries. Do you know Stu Jeffries? Okay.
Yeah.
So Stu is the morning show host on Boom 97.3.
Do a very good product at Boom.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it is really like literally he's boarding his own, he's opping his own board. Is that how you say it? So he's working his own board. He's got no one else in the room with him. He's the only guy in that room. There's no other human being in the studio. He's queuing everything up. He's literally doing everything. How many people are involved with Metro Morning on CBC Radio 1?
There's
approximately.
There's me and then 2 others.
That's it?
In the morning.
I had
In the
visioned
morning.
like a team of like 17 people.
Oh, that'd be great. Now there are people who come in a little later in the day to line things up. I mean, the one thing is we have a different kind of format, somewhat a unique format, and that requires quite a bit of work just for guests. And if you're gonna have the deputy premier or somebody on, you want to have some notes.
You do your homework.
Yeah.
Right. Who are we talking to here today? Okay. Interesting comment again from Jesse Hirsch. I'll give him one more here, which is that he says, does Metro Morning still have a website? He says, it seems like the Metro Morning website redirects to the audio feed. Do you know anything about the Metro Morning website?
This rings a bell, but I'm afraid I don't know. You remember when we were talking earlier about don't try to claim things that you don't know about?
Yeah, if you don't know, just say that.
One of those scenarios, yeah.
Don't be afraid to say I'm not too sure about that one.
Yeah, I do think that is essentially what the Metro Morning website is, though. It is an audio feed, yeah.
Are you at all friendly? I'm going to be all over the place here, David, but I'm excited to have you here. A big fan of the program, as you know. So are you at all friendly with Andy Berry? Like, do you have any relationship with Andy Berry?
No, I don't. Andy is still around, but I did not overlap with him in my career.
Right.
And so, no, I don't see him on the regular. There are a number of people, sort of the old people who've been around a long time.
Well, I'll bet you Matt Galloway still has a
Matt does
relationship.
still touch base with Andy periodically, and that's how I hear about what's up with him. Yeah.
Well, yeah, naturally, I'm curious because, before he signed off from CBC Radio 1, he talked about his Parkinson's. And, we're all curious how Andy's doing. We know his wife has sadly passed away. And how is Andy? I think there's a story I heard once where somebody referred to Andy Berry as a draft dodger, and Andy very quickly corrected this individual and said, it's different than...
Conscientious objector?
Yes, it's a conscientious objector, not a draft dodger.
I didn't know that about him.
Yeah, he's an American who. That's how we got. We got lots of great people. Shout out to Bill King. A lot of great people came up here because they were conscientious objectors.
The Americans got some good people from us too.
Well,
we can go back to John. We can go back further than John Candy. We can look at Jim Carrey. There's a ton of people. Yeah.
Listen, just when we canceled the Arrow, okay, what a brain drain that was.
We canceled it? When did that happen?
You got to do some investigative reporting on that one. Revisit that Diefenbaker situation there. Dief the Chief. Okay. So speaking of Marketplace, I want to play a little clip here as we just talk about your life before Metro Morning. Again, thank you for giving me 4 hours of your time, David. Wink, wink. Okay, here we go. This is just a little clip of David Common.
Hello?
Hi, is that Leonard?
Yeah.
Leonard, this is going to sound like a really weird call. My name is David Common. I'm calling from CBC News. We're doing an investigation into stolen vehicles, and I'm pretty sure I'm sitting in your once stolen vehicle in West Africa.
No way.
Yeah. Do you mind if I FaceTime you?
I don't mind at all.
Does this look like your car?
That's it. It was stolen September, October of last year.
And what happened?
At about 3 in the morning, you see a car and 2 guys pull up towards the driveway. And about 4 minutes later, the light goes off. They're gone. The car's gone.
All right, tell me about this. I mean, I was reading into this, but you were in Ghana for that.
In Ghana for that, yeah. So we went and did that at the end of last summer, early fall. And look, we knew that auto theft had been taking off, particularly in the GTHA, that it was groups primarily out of Montreal who were coming in, stealing vehicles. It's evolved a little bit since then, but huge. $1.2 billion in cars stolen last year, and this is feeding a lot of crime in this city. So we knew that a lot of them were being exported, and we also knew that we as journalists could do something that cops could not. And that is go to the other countries and actually find them.
Right.
There are a number of countries that would be, not that we don't go to unsafe places. We certainly do and have. But Ghana is a country that is easier to operate in. We knew that stolen vehicles were ending up there. And we knew that there was a sort of a law enforcement agency that might play ball with us if we were to show up. And so we did show up, and that's... we did it on relatively a shoestring budget, considering an international assignment. Went there, and that was the morning after we landed. I mean, I think that's hour 8 in Ghana or something like that, and we found there 40 cars, and you just start running the VINs on them, and it's stolen from North York, stolen from Ottawa, stolen from Toronto, stolen from Etobicoke. Click, 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 click. And some of them still had license plates. Almost all of them still had the registration documents. Some had lease documents. The last time I got my oil change, here's the name. And so Len, who you heard there, who we woke up at 7 in the morning, before I FaceTimed him, he had to put a shirt on. That's a little inside knowledge for you.
Could you grade cheese on his abs?
Nothing against Len.
No
but,
comment.
I'd probably, he looked like a trim guy, but that might be that might be a little too much. Yeah. So it was really quite something. It really quite something seeing where all of these vehicles end up and how quickly. Just understanding the other end of that equation.
And again, for what program was that for? Marketplace?
It actually wasn't, although it sounds very much like a Marketplace story. It was for the National. I had done stories on auto theft for Marketplace before, showing just how easy it is to hijack a vehicle, using these relay attacks or the CAN bus attacks, the various ways in which thieves today are stealing these vehicles.
Have you ever had a car stolen?
I've never have. No, my neighbor did. Yeah, and relatively recently. Yeah.
This is why, pardon my French, you can't say this maybe you can say it on CBC Radio 1 in 2024, but I always drove shit boxes and nobody ever wants to steal them.
I drove here today in a 15-year-old Toyota and it runs fine.
Yeah. I had my 99 Mazda Protege until 2020, June 2020, and I still ran fine. I only got rid of it. I just didn't want to.
Now, what you're not saying is there were horses pulling it for the last 5 years, right?
Shout out to whatever Kidney Foundation benefited from that donation there. You get a tax receipt, which is...
As you do,
which is cool. So you've done, I looked it up. You have been dispatched, that's the fancy word when they send you somewhere, to 85 countries.
Mm-hmm.
You've been to every province and territory in this fine country.
It's great to do that. That's like the joy that being throughout this country is amazing.
Okay, now rank all the provinces.
Yeah.
In order of your favorite to least favorite.
Do you know what? If you were to, in all seriousness, if I were to do that, I would probably pick a territory and I would go with Nunavut. And, I haven't traveled extensively around at Nunavut, but I've had the privilege of going to Iqaluit and a couple of the other communities. And it is utterly amazing there for so many reasons. I've been out on the land. You go out onto the frozen tundra, you go out onto the frozen Arctic Ocean with any of the Inuit who are hunting or just traversing the land. And it is, you look out and you think you see nothing. and they'll tell you how you're missing everything.
Right.
And that is, to do that in our own country, that is absolutely wild. Of course, we have all sorts of other beautiful things. You can go down to Shubenacadie, you can go to Shediac, you can go all over the place in Atlantic Canada.
But aren't you going to be bored as host of Metro Morning when you have to sit in Toronto all the time?
It is a different beast.
Like, it sounds boring to me. I feel like you want to be out there. I'm going to ask you in a moment about being in a submarine submerged near the Korean peninsula.
Yeah, it
like
didn't go
that's
well.
the action. Yes, I want to hear that story. But Ukraine, Afghanistan, Iraq, like these are the places. Somalia. You're confronting pirates off Somalia. Like, you're going to be so bored as host of Metro Morning.
Okay, you say that, but look, I don't know how your brain works.
I'm bored on your behalf.
I'll tell you how my brain works. I need new challenges. That's how I'm built. And this is a challenge. We're trying to do something with this program, and I'm not the only one who's involved in it, but I play a big part. And so we're trying to do a thing, and just the idea of having a new challenge, that is what excites me.
Sure, but it is a well-oiled machine that you're not building anything from scratch here. This thing is a well-oiled machine.
What do you know about building something from scratch?
I built this from scratch. I think, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think that you're very good as host of Metro Morning. I think at some point you're going to get this itch, and it's like, why am I not on an icebreaker in the Arctic right now looking for the Franklin expedition?
I don't know. I mean, and I have done all of these things, and there's absolutely a joy and an amazement and an adrenaline rush off of all of these things.
Sure.
But I'm not kidding you when I say we look for different chapters. Like, I've had
New
different
challenge.
chapters. I've gone through different chapters and new challenges in my life, and I need them. And this just absolutely made sense in this moment. And is it going to be my last job in this business? Maybe not. I don't know. I'm 4 months into it. It'd be hard to kind of guess where I'm going to be 5 or 10 years from now.
No, I totally get what you're saying about this is a new challenge. So you've done these exciting things. You're hosting the most listened to radio broadcast morning show in this city. So this, as challenges go, this is sort of like when Strombo took the Hockey Night in Canada hosting gig. He told me, yeah, that's the gig. There's nothing bigger in this country than hosting Hockey Night in Canada if you want to be like a sports host, etc. So you're now in the big chair at Metro Morning. But can you go back and maybe some greatest hits here? Like, tell me a little bit about that comment you made about being submerged in that submarine near the Korean Peninsula. Let's hit some of these hot spots here before
Right.
I find out what the hell you were doing interviewing Elmo. Do you know Elmo? It's like when I interviewed Ed the Sock. Like
That'd be amazing. I'm interviewing Ed the Sock. I interviewed the
he'll
original.
do it with you tomorrow if you
Really?
like. Should I have
Okay.
him call into Metro Morning?
Yeah. Elmo was I did the original Elmo. It's not
Kevin Clash.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah, he's very famous. A little controversy.
There's a little
big
controversy,
there, of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
But Kevin Clash was the original.
Yeah, and so I interviewed him, and I had no idea who he was or what he looked like when I first interviewed him, but it was for the 40th anniversary of Sesame Street. I'd have to go back and
Probably
look.
a late 60s thing. So
Yeah,
I would
so
say it's probably 50.
40, maybe it was 50.
Because only knows I'm turning 50, and Sesame Street's older than me, so I'm guessing Sesame Street
Happy
is...
soon to be birthday,
Thank
first
you.
of all.
Well, I'll get back to that, because I'm going to
Okay.
invite you to my party.
All right. Okay. So happy soon to be birthday, and we'll look ahead to the party. So the submarine. Look,
Yeah, submarine.
Canada did not have submarines for a period of time in its military, and the federal government at the time decided to buy some used submarines that the Brits weren't using anymore. Problem is they weren't so great, and so
And they smell like cigarettes.
Yeah, well, one of them, and quite tragically, caught on fire when it was coming back to Canada, and a Canadian sailor died in that. Another one was quite badly injured. Because fire on any kind of ship or boat is very, very serious, particularly one that is submerged.
Yeah.
It came back to Canada. There
You
were
can't
whole
open a
bunch-
window.
all sorts of repairs being done to it, and they spent a lot of money, and they ended up sending this one sub called HMCS Chicoutimi down to the Asia Pacific region to help part of a multinational effort with a bunch of Canada's friends watch what's happening in an area that China is getting more powerful, and also the North Koreans are patrolling with their own kinds of submarines and just trying. It's an amazing number of things that happen under the water that are sort of unseen to all of us. And so I went with that sub, and there are things on it that we can't talk to you about. But
Like, is that because you signed an NDA of sorts?
you could say that kind of thing. That we don't want people who are adversaries of Canada to know about the things that our subs can and cannot do, for instance. So mostly I just was never exposed to those things. They'd hide them from me, right?
Sure.
But there are a couple of things that we couldn't disclose. We couldn't tell you where the sub was at any one point in time for obvious reasons.
Right.
The challenge with it was the air conditioning broke. And it got real hot real fast. Now, they gave me the best place on the submarine that you could sleep outside of the captain's bunk, which was right next to the torpedoes. Now, whatever it is they put in the torpedoes makes them naturally cool.
Oh, interesting.
And you can basically, and not to go over the top here, but you can straddle a torpedo, and that's how you cool your body down because... the coolness from whatever fuels a torpedo.
Like Dr. Strangelove there.
Something going on there. I don't know what it is, but it was a comfortable place to try to sleep when I was on there, and the air conditioner.
Well, what temps are we talking about? I'm curious. Only because I took my daughter swimming at a pool in South Etobicoke called Gus Ryder Pool.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
So I'm sitting there. I had to disrobe. Okay, I might not be able to.
Gus Ryder's known as a hot pool in this
city. I felt
city.
ill. Okay, admittedly, after I had to, like, literally, I was as naked as you can get without being arrested in that place.
Mm-hmm.
It felt to me like it was 45 degrees sitting to watch your kids swim in that pool. What kind of temps are we talking about?
So
in this,
on the sub, I think we were 30, 35, somewhere in there. It's been a few years, so I've forgotten. But look, that's sustained. The thing is, with you in the pool, you could leave the pool, and Gus Ryder is. It is known as a hot pool in this city. It runs hot. It always has.
It's wild. It's wild how hot it is there. But, I can't leave the pool because the 7-year-old likes every 5 minutes looks up to see if I'm watching her swim. And then
and you're just trying to maintain consciousness.
I can't just go outside. Yeah. So, okay. So, greatest hits here. But
there's also a sauna in that pool, at Gus Ryder.
They
have a dry sauna in there.
So
maybe it's just
you swam at Gus Ryder.
I've been to Gus Ryder. I was just there, in fact, the other day. But
really?
And they have a gym there as well. They have a
little
health club.
No, you don't have to get too specific. But what neighborhood do you call home these days, Dave?
I live in the south end of Etobicoke. So
I didn't know that.
We're all in the same.
I had no idea. So when we're finished recording, I'm going to corner you and find out where you are, David. You don't have to give me the address because you don't want some guy in this flammable shirt.
Oh, I'd tell
hiding
anybody else on the street where I live, but not you. Yeah.
You don't want me hanging out with my what's going on
because
with
of
David
your
Common.
butterfly wing collar shirt that you've got there.
It's your insurance company finds out I'm hanging around with this shirt on. They're not going to insure you for fire.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's fascinating that you were in that submarine near the Korean Peninsula. But what is the story? You were on the icebreaker in the Arctic searching for the ill-fated Franklin expedition.
Yes.
What was that like?
That is amazing. And again, for the same sort of reasons that you're going through these waters that are, the Northwest Passage, you hear people talk about it, but
only Stan Rogers.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. You hear singers sing about it and you hear people talk about it. It is strategically really important for Canada. These are Canadian waters, and ships that couldn't pass through this area are soon going to be able to pass through that area year round. There's all sorts of things, environmental, climate change, military, strategic, that flow through that. There's also just a lot of history. So you're going past places that the Inukshuk or Inukshuk looking things are left, but they're 200 or 300 or 400 years old because the Inuit used them as like directional finders, and they're just left there. So that's just kind of wild. But looking for, I was not on the vessel that ended up finding it. I wasn't like that happened a couple years later, unfortunately. But it's pretty wild. They're using side scanning sonar, and they tow it behind a fast boat, essentially looking at the surface of just what's down there. It's all pretty shallow too, so it's wild. I did talk to the underwater archaeology folks from Parks Canada who did find it, and some of them, like, this has been their career. That's what they've done, and so they were going by, and it was the last pass of the day, and something comes up, and they looked at the profile of it, and they knew before they dove, they knew right away, this is it. That would be, that's the joy of being with people who are having these amazing moments and being side by side with them as they're experiencing this.
Amazing. Okay, now because I'm digging these stories here. I know we agreed on an hour. I might steal a few more minutes. You can always storm out, but then the headline I'm going to write is David. Listen, as David Common storms out of his Toronto Mike debut. You were watching our Navy, Canada's Navy, confront pirates off of Somalia.
Mm-hmm.
I need a little bit of that one. That's wild.
So there's a bit of this that's still going on today. We're seeing a lot more of the Houthi rebels who are shooting missiles at ships, and that is an ongoing issue as we talk to each other. But the high seas are, the next thing you order on Amazon, it's on a ship right now, and so it's what happens on the seas is really, really important. Even if we don't see it and we don't think it's part of our lives, it's really part of our lives. And so what's happening then with piracy is. Somalia, very poor country. Particularly at the time that I was there was an awful lot of conflict, which meant an awful lot of guns and not a lot of opportunity, and gangs that were running and looking for ways to make money. And one way they were making money was hijacking ships, these cargo ships that were going through, and they would, often attack it at night. And they basically get a speedboat that matches the speed of one of these big giant cargo vessels and run up a ladder to try to go inside and take the ship, take them hostage, take the ship hostage, and negotiate millions of dollars to get the ship back. And so the navies of the Western world got together and said, this is screwing up our economies. We can't have this. And so they sent us down there, and a lot of it is flying the ship's helicopter, and that just causes the attack to break. Right, like the moment they see a helicopter that's got a gun on it, the pirates run away. And the Canadians at that point couldn't, the attack was no longer happening, and so they're not going to start shooting at. Well,
I'm just excited to hear our Navy has guns. Like, this
and this was, if I remember correctly, it was first of all, I remember it was an old Sea King helicopter, since retired. Right. But this was the first time since the Korean War that a Canadian naval vessel, and the helicopter's considered part of it, had fired shots in anger to try to break an attack. And so that was quite something. I'll tell you another thing, which I tell this story periodically, and this, it's the beauty of this job for me has been the people that you meet. And it's never, you meet presidents and prime ministers, and that's interesting being in the same room as those people, but it's always about normal folks, frankly, who are doing extraordinary things or doing them in extraordinary places. And so I remember there was this one sailor driving this thing called a RIB, rigid hulled inflatable boat, and it's their fast boat. They're kind of like their little attack boat. And the ship had seen on their very long range sonar radar, they had seen the signature of a vessel that looked like a pirate mothership. So this is a place to keep guns and ladders and all of that stuff. And they thought that could be what this is. And so they fire up the gas turbine engines, go flying towards this thing, very high speed, get up to it and launch this RIB, this small, fast attack boat with a boarding party. And the captain of the ship says, get on with them. I'm like, absolutely. You don't have to ask me twice. I go ripping out, and we go up to this mothership. And the shape of it is called a dhow, DHOW. We go up to it. And it becomes clear right away, this is not a pirate ship. Oh. It's migrants trying to make a better life. But here is where things get fascinating and potentially terrifying. Because there is maybe 80 or 90 guys on top of this ship. And they're 4 days into their voyage. One guy who speaks English. We have a back and forth. And it's tense in the beginning. Their guns are out and things like that. And they just want to make sense of what's happening. And at the end of the conversation, these guys have to continue with a little putt-putt motor, essentially, to wherever they're trying to get to, all to get a better life. And the one guy who speaks English says, hey, do you have any water? Well, they had a box of water in this RIB that we were in. And so the guy who's in charge pulls one bottle out. Well, you think about it. Yeah. 80 or 90 people, all of whom are thirsty. What happens? They all lean to one side. And what's going to happen to that boat? Yeah, it is about to tip over, and it is it's going down in milliseconds. Everything slows down in my mind at this point. Right. It's starting to tip, and this kid who's driving this little Canadian Navy boat, 19, maybe 20, he has the wherewithal to fire the throttle on his boat and rams the other boat just enough that he stops it from tipping. Now, here's where things get all the more terrifying in terms of what it could have been. He probably saved the lives of those 90 guys who were up top.
Right.
What we didn't know is there were 140 women and kids below deck. And they would have been done for if he hadn't had the wherewithal, the training, the smarts, the reaction to do what he did, and just enough. He hit the sweet spot and saved 200 plus lives.
David, listen to yourself. What a story. You were there because, CBC dispatched one of their finest journalists to be there. And you're going to be so freaking bored at Metro Morning. Okay?
I don't know about that because I'm not bored yet. So,
well, 4 months in,
see.
and I'm just warning you that it's you're going to be like,
so.
at some point I was okay. So, and again, I'm happy for you, and it's quite the great gig you got there. But I now need to just quickly get your origin story because I know you went to school here, but then I see that you went in Stockholm. You studied international security issues at a university, I guess it's called Stockholm University in Sweden. So maybe, can you give me an understanding of when did you realize you wanted to be a journalist? And then what's your first gig in news media in this country?
Okay, do you know where Jarvis Collegiate is?
Of course I do.
Yeah, okay.
My son's name is actually Jarvis.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's a fun fact. But I know Jarvis Collegiate. I got a neighbor who teaches there, actually.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Okay, so I went to Jarvis for high school, and the air ambulance used to land at on our football field because Wellesley Hospital was across the street at the time. They had the burn unit, and I, would interact with them, with the air ambulance folks, and so it was like, you know what, I could become a flight nurse. That was my thinking out of high school. And then we had really good speakers who would come to Jarvis and, had different people come, premiers and prime ministers and business leaders and what have you. And they'd just tell us about their lives. And this guy came, broadcaster, and told us about what his life was. And it was end of grade 13. That's my vintage. And
we called it OAC though.
Oh wait, yes.
So
okay.
So I mean, I know it's funny because my mom went to grade 13, and but we
okay,
call
so
it OAC,
OAC,
which
yeah.
but it's still a fifth year of high school. I did it too.
The extra year of high school.
Sure.
So I this broadcaster came, and it was like a light bulb moment.
Who is this broadcaster?
I don't know if you know him, Peter Mansbridge.
Didn't he
Set you up
report
for
on
that one?
Airports and he would Churchill?
You got it right.
He's an FOTM too.
Yeah,
and,
okay.
And his wife was actually in the basement last
Cynthia
month.
Dale.
Cynthia Dale. Yeah.
Yeah.
And who went to my high school.
Sorry, was she trapped in your basement, or was she actually on the podcast?
She's still chained up around the corner. Don't tell anyone.
Yeah,
no.
Peter will hurt you. Yeah. Peter came, and he ended up writing me a letter of reference.
Peter Mansbridge.
And so then I ended up going, there were a whole bunch of layoffs in journalism at the time, and I thought maybe is journalism the thing that I should go and do in school, and I didn't. I ended up going to York and Seneca at the same time. Lots of these programs exist where you can do
concurrently.
Okay.
Okay.
Lots of them exist now, but that was the only one at the time. So I did. Yeah, so I did them both. And it was designed. The program was designed to be like that. You did it concurrent, and then in my third year, you're talking about Stockholm.
Yeah.
I really, we didn't grow up with a ton of money. I hadn't traveled really at all, and had the opportunity to, on kind of the cheap, because of the way the program was set up, to do an exchange. And so went off to Stockholm, and it was absolutely amazing. And so you asked where I got my start from Stockholm. I cold called CBC's London bureau in the UK and said, can I come and work for you for free? And they didn't even have an internship at that point, but they liked free.
The price was right.
Yeah. And so I went there and ended up working there for a few months. And at a certain point, they had little odd jobs and things like that. And they paid me a bit here and there, which kept me basically living in the room I was living in. And that continued. Came back here for, finish off school. And then from there, it became a closed captioner at CBC, something I'm terrible at because I type with 2 fingers. And so
Hunt and peck.
Exactly. The hard of hearing were very poorly served. And somebody leaned over in the newsroom because it was a way in to the newsroom. Someone leaned over and said, "You're quite awful at that. Why are you here?" And I'm like, "It's a way in." And that just sort of connected me with a thing, which connected me with a thing, which, it worked.
Okay, but Dave, here's the big question I have. When I think of David Common, I think CBC lifer. That's why I'm wearing this flammable shirt right now from 1976. But then when I'm looking into
Sounds like
your
life sentence.
Life and Times, I understand you did work for CTV
I
News.
did. Yeah, I
so
did.
just give me that, like, because people think you're just like, oh, you're at CBC forever, but no.
No, it was not a long time, and it was very early in my career. But you can tell anybody who's in journalism right now, you sort of cobble together a bunch of different things, and sometimes it means you're working at two different places at once. And there was a bit of that. I was working at both CBC and CTV at one point in time, and I was working at CTV solo. But it was in the early days, the Young Street Bureau, right in the Eden Center. That's CTV had an operation there at that point.
Wow. Okay, you're kind of fascinating. You might have to come back at some point for a sequel. But now I have a hidden agenda here. But when you were working at...
Finally, we get to the hidden agenda.
Well, it's not a bad thing. But you'll see what I mean when I get there. Except you, as you know, you mentioned Marketplace. So how long did you spend working at Marketplace?
8 seasons.
8 seasons. Look at you. Okay. And one of the many, subjects that you tackled at Marketplace was the questionable sales practices in Canada's funeral homes.
Oh, yes.
Can you just give me a, obviously maybe we can hunt this down on Gem or YouTube or something, but give me in a nutshell, what is that? Like, are people just gouging? Did you find that some funeral homes were gouging people?
So you are testing my memory a bit here because
Sure.
there's been a lot of stories in between, and let me try to see if I can get all the details right. So some of it was around pressure tactics at a time that people were most vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And so trying to upsell you into the better casket or telling you that this wasn't appropriate, even though it's totally legal.
You really are at your most vulnerable when you're in that room.
Who
right?
are you to tell me what's appropriate and not?
Right.
So some of it was that, and some of it was looking at the way in which people at some funeral homes, this is certainly not all, but at some funeral homes, were incentivized. The way, the notion that people would be paid on commission is hardly unheard of in most businesses.
But it is kind of gross in funeral services. I think it's gross. And
we can debate that, but yes.
Because your incentive, if someone at their most vulnerable is sitting there, it might be dad died of a heart attack yesterday or something, and you're at your most vulnerable, and you have somebody with you who's incented to sell you the premium casket and and forget those sandwiches that the old ladies make, okay? You guys need a steak for it. My point is, you're incented to raise that bill as high as you can because you're getting
the
a
funeral
percentage.
you want to have. You shouldn't be forced to have one or pushed into one that you don't, right?
You're awfully vulnerable in that moment. So again, I mentioned hidden agenda, and it is simply, I want to give you a gift right now, which is a measuring tape from Ridley Funeral Home, Pillars of This Community. And I'm here to say, I've spent so much time with Brad Jones at Ridley Funeral Home, and none of those questionable sales practices happen in that fine facility.
I am pretty sure Ridley emailed me in the aftermath
Brad
of that
Jones
story to talk about it and to talk about how there certainly were a number of funeral directors who wrote and said, look, there are some of the bigger companies and some funeral directors aren't great players in this, right?
There are, a lot of...
What exactly do they measure?
What would you like to measure with that, Mr. Collins?
I will not answer that. Yeah.
We're not on CBC, don't forget. Yeah. Okay, so Brad Jones, Ridley Funeral Home, again, that's an independent family run. Like, he owns the place, his family lives on the premises, and there's not many of those left.
Who's
actually.
Ridley then?
The guy they bought it from. So Arthur Ridley sold it to Brad Jones, who's
you really know it.
Only because I produced their podcast, and I know Brad very, very well. So shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. Do you like Italian food, David?
I've been known to like it, yes.
You've got a reputation. By the way, you have kids, right? Because Judy wrote in and said, what's the ratio of your kids laughing at your dad jokes versus rolling their eyes?
Oh, the rolling of the eyes is way higher there, because it is just... I'm in the volume business, right? Like, I just put them out there, and at one point, one's going to stick. So if it takes 1,200 dad jokes to get there, and then one goes,
it's a numbers game.
Then you leave, right?
So these kids are rolling eyes age. Like, what?
My kids' eyes are no longer in their heads. They've just rolled right out. We haven't seen them in ages. Yeah.
So what kind of ages are we talking about here for the kids?
I don't talk about my kids a lot, only because I think, I want them to kind of have their own lives. But I have... As we speak, I now have a 19-year-old. So I have
I have a 19-year-old.
Do you? Yeah, I have a 19-year-old and a 15-year-old. I had... Okay. How old were you? I'm not going to get you to out yourself, because I was 28 when my first kid was
27.
Born. 27.
Because I have a 22-year-old.
Yeah. And what was it that... Because, having a kid at 27 is hardly unheard of, but among your peers, is that because I was on the younger edge of my
Okay, so
peers.
I actually can speak. I'll come on Metro Morning tomorrow and give you more detail. But I have 2 sets of children
Yeah.
with 2 wives. Okay,
Okay, yeah, not the first person in the city who's like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Shout out to Ralph Benmergui. Okay. Who hit his head and you didn't, and I'm proud of you. And after
Yet.
we're finished, don't jump up and hit your head. Okay. But I have lived both experiences. I absolutely, every time I did stuff, my now 19 and 22-year-old, my 19-year-old lives in Montreal. She's going to McGill, actually.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
And my 22-year-old's at York, and I'm very proud of him too. So with that set of children, I was the young dad. Like, I was always the young dad.
Yep.
And I also now have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. I walked them to school this morning. And when I'm in that crowd, I'm the old dad. Like, I literally...
played both
I
ends
play
of
both
this.
hands. I'm a
Yeah.
young dad with one set because there's a 10-year gap between these second and third kid. So I got the 4 kids. But yeah, for one couplet there, I'm the young dad. And for the other couplet, I'm the old dad. So you're a young dad.
I'm a young dad among some. I don't know, like I had a trigger point. I went off on an assignment at a certain point, and it was without getting into too much detail, it went bad. Like it was.
Now I want all those details.
It was in Haiti. And
After the earthquake.
no, this was before the earthquake.
okay.
There was a coup underway at the time, and it was a very difficult assignment. There, you know, I almost got killed.
Wow.
Yeah, and
That is a bad assignment.
yeah, it is a
Shout
bad
out to Ridley
assignment.
Funeral Home.
Okay, I will give you that is yes, that is well done. I have nothing more to add, and it was just like a priorities change.
But this is tying to you being a young dad. I feel like that's
it was because I came back and I'm like,
Right.
buy a house, get a dog, have kids.
That's why you're the host of Metro Morning. Now we just thank you. It's like therapy. Okay, I'm going to send you an invoice at the end of this, and this stable, dependable, every day at the same time. It's a short commute, and all this you have now as host of Metro Morning is to keep you alive.
Maybe.
I'm telling you, you've done some dangerous stuff. Okay, you don't want to. You're hugging. I don't know what the missiles. What are you hugging there for to stay cool?
That was a
in some
torpedo,
torpedo,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Damn the torpedoes, David. Shout out.
That's a great line.
Tom Petty gave me that line.
Yeah.
The late great. Okay, so again, I am sensitive to your valuable time. You've been wonderful, and it's been great meeting you. I just have a couple of. So I want to
just
say
can't believe
the
how
reason
much
I
beer
brought
you've
up
been drinking this whole time.
the reason I brought up the Italian food, you're like,
Oh, yeah.
why the hell you ask me about my kids? So yes, these kids, your whole family is going to be full of delicious Italian food, and you'll probably still have some leftovers because you're leaving here with a large lasagna. It's in my freezer right now. It literally arrived from Palma Pasta about 20 minutes before you arrived. PalmaPasta.com is where you go. It's delicious, authentic Italian food, and they were happy to feed the Common family.
Look at that. It's very kind of you.
CBC doesn't give this kind of swag. That's for sure.
No,
Okay.
we have no lasagnas being given out. That is
And no
true.
beer. Okay.
No.
And quickly, if people are looking for best practices and advice as they invest or have somebody invest their money, please subscribe and listen to the Advantaged Investor podcast from Raymond James Canada. It's hosted by FOTM Chris Cooksey, whose son scored a hell of a goal the other day. I would just recommend that highly. And also, David, if you have a drawer at home full of old cables or maybe old phones
Don't
or
we
old
all?
electronics, go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, put in your postal code and find out a place near you. You can drop that off. It will be properly recycled so the chemicals do not end up in our landfill.
That's good to hear.
What's the morale like at CBC these days?
Yeah, it goes up and down as it is with any journalist organization in this country. CTV's just gone through a whole schwack of layoffs, and
Well, that's where I'm
places
going
have
with this, as
disappeared,
you know.
okay?
So CBC coworker
CBC's got some difficult times as well. Okay, CBC coworker.
writes in during the live stream, actually, did the feds tell Tate to cut 3% or not? Should she and the other executives be taking bonuses? And that's a heavy question for you, Mr. Common, because you enjoy your job and you don't want to upset anybody.
I could not tell you what the feds, shockingly, they didn't invite me to the meeting.
You weren't
between
an
the
embedded
minister and
journalist in
president
the
of
closet.
CBC. Yeah,
Like when Jay Leno was in the closet listening to them, who's going to replace Johnny Carson.
very often people who work at CBC are just as surprised as anybody else
Right.
about what happens in the corporate corridors at CBC. In fact, most of the time, I think, would be the case. What was the second part of that question? There was
Should these executives, and this is, I feel like, I now feel bad for my guest here because I'm giving you a question. You can't win on this one, but should she and the other executives be taking bonuses, considering they're cutting Is it 10% of the workforce? I can't remember, like 250. Anyways,
It's 10%. It would be 10% of the jobs, which doesn't, you can eliminate jobs without eliminating workforce. In other words,
Right, like early buyout packages and all
exactly,
that.
and people retire and you don't fill them in.
Right.
But look, to the heart of the question, to the bonuses, because you're trying to murder me here.
well, you can always say, tap out here. I'm not here to make any guests feel uncomfortable.
I would just say, if I look at my friends who work in the, I don't know the answer to this because I'm not a manager and I don't get bonuses in that. I'm not part of that structure. But I don't know what they are contractually obligated to do. So if I think about, if you think about the corporate world that where bonuses are there to incentivize specific kind of performance, I don't know how they're written for our managers and can they get out of them? I don't know if they can. And if they can't, then they should say that. And if you're trying to incentivize a certain kind of performance, like that, just because it's a big bureaucracy, we should be more mindful of the taxpayers' money. We absolutely should. But what it does with the bonuses, I'm not giving you a super sasatisfying answer.
No,
I have more
what?
questions.
I feel like laying off the hook here. Like,
yeah.
I feel like I should move you away from the CBC where you actually are gainfully employed. And maybe just reference the fact that as we speak in February 2024, we're just coming off like massive Bell layoffs, which affected many at Bell Media.
Mm-hmm.
Like many good journalists who worked for CTV News were tapped
Look
on
at
the shoulder.
everybody at W5,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Almost everybody.
Almost.
There's
And-
three
and-
people left, I think.
And radio people, there's some people at Chum 104.5 Chum, and
Yeah.
45 stations were
that just
sold.
disappeared. Yeah.
There's a
Or-
great episode
yeah.
of John Pohl people should listen to who bought 4 of these stations, and we talk about what
That's
what
a
Bell-
really interesting story.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so Bell calls it, what was the term that guy, the guy said, basically suggested that there's no future in radio. It's like and meanwhile, they sold 45 to people like FOTM John Pohl, and you should hear that conversation. But yeah, it's a tough time for your industry is what I'm saying. It's not just CBC, but CTV and beyond. It is a tough time for your industry. And do you have any concerns? Like, it sounds like you've been embedded and dispatched to all these countries in sometimes very dangerous situations, but it's important to have that embedded journalist who could report back to us via CBC News or whatnot. And it feels like that is it's endangered. And I wonder what that does to democracy. I wonder if that's not good for anybody. I just wonder how you feel as a journalist.
Yeah, I think you're running across the full spectrum of things. I think about the young people that I work with. And what a future career looks like for them. So I think about a lot of the really good work that I see happening around me, and I do think about some of the forces that we see at play around the world. The point is we actually need people who are engaged in their world and who know what's going on. And if you don't have a free press, a strong free press, you got a problem.
Yeah, we'll just ask Russia about that. Absolutely, 100% here. So we'll leave it on a light note here. I'm ready to play some Lowest of the Low, which is one of my favorite Toronto bands.
That is a very good band, yeah.
Love that band. I'm curious, what kind of jams does a David Common listen to when he's do you ever I'm going to listen to some music while I work out or go for a walk. I don't know if you have a dog or whatever, but like what are you listening to?
Oh, I only listen to Toronto Mike. Why would I listen
See, I
to
don't
music?
believe you. I thought you were an honest man, David.
Yeah.
Come on, now I'm losing.
I'm
you're
a
losing your
smart
integrity.
man is what I am.
You're losing your you're getting
I
lasagna
would,
regardless.
you look, Lowest of the Low is absolutely a thing that I listen to.
Shakespeare My Butt?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, 1991.
Do it.
Well, it's coming. This is on Shakespeare My Butt. Do you tune into any Nirvana or Pearl Jam? Are you a grunge guy? Do you prefer the hip hop? You a Frank Sinatra? You like Steve Paikin? You want to hear more Sinatra in your diet? Like what?
Does Paikin really listen to Sinatra?
I've done a whole episode of Paikin in which he basically only listened to Sinatra, I think.
So no, Sinatra is not. I can tell you things that are not on my playlist, and that would be one of them. Lowest of the Low is definitely there. If we're talking about the same sort of vintage, Weaker Thans, Broken Social Scene.
I hate Winnipeg.
Yes.
That's like your theme song.
That is my, yeah, exactly.
Broken Social Scene. Okay. So you love that like early 2000s kind of.
Yeah, they do in a good thing. And don't get me wrong. Like I'm not only listening to CBC. I put on my Q107 and pull up a lot of stuff and got my Edge on. There's
put on your Def Leppard.
Yeah.
I can see
Yeah,
that. Your
I
guns and fucking roses, David. Is that what I hear? You got
That's what you're
appetite for
saying.
destruction?
That's what you're saying. Yeah.
All right, seriously, I didn't know it was such a short commute for you. I for some reason I had you coming from like the beaches or something like that. But amazing. I'm gonna find out later where you live, and I'm gonna hide in those bushes. Is that okay?
Yeah, by all means. I will be sure to light them on fire.
No, in all seriousness, love the convo. I feel like there's at some point I got to get you back for a sequel. Now that CBC's already blessed your appearance, although they haven't heard this yet, you can come back at some point and tell me more stories from this, like just stuff you've reported on over the years. You could probably do a whole hour telling me these stories. It's fascinating. So thanks for your time today and for dropping by, man.
Thank you. I hope I still get my bonus.
Like the lasagna?
Yeah.
Or the CBC. Do they give you fresh craft beer over there? Thank you, Great Lakes. And that brings us to the end of our 1,437th show. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm at Toronto Mike. David's on the app formerly known as Twitter. He's at David Common. You can follow him there. I'm going to tag him on this when I drop it in about 10 minutes. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery. We just dropped... it's dropping tomorrow morning. Episode 2 of Between Two Fermenters. That drops tomorrow morning. Much love to Palma Pasta, who got the lasagna here in time for David to bring home. RecycleMyElectronics.ca, Raymond James Canada, and of course Ridley Funeral Home at 14th and Lakeshore. See you all tomorrow. We're speaking of CTV News. Scott Laurie was at CTV News, and he wants to talk about something. It's a very, very interesting story. He's no longer at CTV News. We're going to discuss this. There's going to be a lot of real talk. Tomorrow morning, Scott Laurie makes his debut. See you all then.
Yes, I do. I know it's true, yeah. I know it's true. How about you? While they're picking up trash and they're putting down roads. And they're brokering stocks, the class struggle explodes. And I play this guitar just